Right, let's get into some of the news items. A lot of varied news this past week. A lot, yet again, more confirming news of things that we warned about in the sub intel pieces. We're probably gonna not have sections of the show because it's so much of our show is being used now in mainstream media and other without being referenced, and we don't really care about that because it's about the information. So we're going to start tonight with what's going on in Africa because they've had to tolerate a lot of the fun and games that is now being made prevalent in the so-called Western world. And Tanzania isn't the only African country that's asked the World Horror Organization, and yes, that's the correct term, to pack its bags and get out of the country, as reports that Burundi is expelling the national head of the World Health Organization and three of his subordinates as the country prepares for a presidential election that is being held this coming week. Now, the WHO had repeatedly raised concerns claiming holding the vote during the middle of the pandemic would be prudent. Since when have they become political analysts of what you can and can't do? And this is par for the course these days. You've got people like Gates, who's suddenly become a medical expert, really. Anyway, these claims obviously irritated the government, which is pushing to hold the country's first election since President Pierre Nkurunziza stepped down in 2018. So they've had no candidates for the past 2 years. And a successor candidate from his party, Nkurunziza party, is strongly favoured to win. And his government has been accused of human rights abuses and previously kicked out the UN representatives and others investigating human rights abuses. But opposition candidates are openly contesting the vote, and any suppression tactics have largely been hidden from view. Now, many critics of the government there in the opposition has criticised the decision, though notably nobody is advocating for the election to be cancelled. And that is a sign that the WHO's in World Health Organization's insistence wasn't properly received. And the campaign has already involved many gatherings where people were crowded together, and many suspect the true toll of the virus isn't reflected in official numbers. And all four officials of the World Health Organization were given until Friday to leave the country. Now, the government confirmed on Thursday that a May 12th letter from the Foreign Ministry was sent to the World Health Organization country head Walter Kazidi Malumbo and three others of the UN body of health experts. That's a misnomer, if ever there was one. Expert. There's no such thing. And ordered them out also by Friday. Now, Bernard Natar Iraja, the Foreign Affairs Assistant Minister, said the officials had been declared person non grata, but did not give the reasons. But it wasn't just Tanzania and Burundi, because the president of Madagascar, Andry Rajoelina, also called on all African nations to quit the World Health Organization because of the bad faith of Europe towards Africa. Now, the president says Europe created organizations with the desire for Africans to remain dependent upon them, and that is 100% correct. 100% correct. With all the Dutch, British and various other organisations, all backed and supported by the Rothschilds and the bloodline families. They've absolutely destroyed Africa for greed again, minerals. You know, it wouldn't be too bad if they actually give some of it back, you know. But no, they've got to take the whole lot and use the African people practically as slaves in these mines in appalling conditions, I might add, all to sell what to me is anyway is a fancy piece of glass known as a diamond and has no real value, certainly not the value that you're paying for ridiculous wedding ring prices. That's all it is at the end of the day, an expensive piece of glass. And yet people die because of it. Nobody, and that's part of the problem, no one follows the path of where that's come from. Like, very few follow what happens next, which is the future. And one of the reasons Madagascar has decided to throw them out is Africa has found a medicine against coronavirus, but Europe thinks that they have a monopoly of intelligence as such, and they are refusing to acknowledge it. And this comes against the backdrop that he said, I invite all African nations to quit the international organizations in order for us to build our own. Rajoelina has put his reputation and credibility on the line, touting the medicine as a cure, but he said it cures COVID-19 within 10 days. And no one will stop us moving forward, not a country, not an organisation, he said in response to the World Health Organization's concerns. You see, the World Health doesn't want cures. They create, yes, you heard that right, they create diseases and give to the African people and the Pakistani people and the Indian people. And then they roll out their expensive vaccines, and we'll have more on that later. And he said the proof of the tonic's efficiency was in the healing of our patients. And he called the medicine a preventative and curative remedy. He said Madagascar, till date, has reported 212 coronavirus infections and 107 recoveries. And the country has only had one critical case and 0 deaths. Oops. That's why the World Health doesn't want people going in. Because they want to kill people. Fact. They've been killing people since it started. And the UN. And the patients who have healed have taken no other products other than what is called COVID organics, the president said, adding that his country had a history of traditional medicine. And he said, what if this remedy had been discovered by a European country instead of Madagascar? As he queried the World Health and other skeptics. Well, the point is, if it had been discovered, it would have been kept hidden under all kinds of patent rules, because that's what's been going on. You know, the same European countries who have known there was a cure for cancer in 1927 when a German scientist found the cure. And by 1927-28, they killed him. Medical industry, backed by the Medicis and the Rockefellers. That's where the name medicine comes from, medicine. And the problem with COVID, he said, what is the problem with COVID organics really? He said, could it be just that the product comes from Africa? Well, the same could be said about some of the Native American people. They've got potions that work. Remember, they weren't sick until the Europeans came. And could it be that it's not okay for a country like Madagascar, which is the 63rd poorest country in the world, to have come up with this formula that can help save the world, he said. My country, Madagascar, leaves all the organisations tonight, and he called on all other African nations to do the same. Hear, hear, I say. Finally, some people are waking up to these organisations of death. US-backed forces, yes, as it's called, have seized Syrian commercial bank in the Al-Hasaka Governorate, and as they expelled all the employees inside the building and established full control over the site. And this was according to a field report by the Syrian Democratic Forces, who are working alongside the US coalition. How interesting. That name, Democratic, again, comes up. Of course, the original Democratic Force was known as the KKK. Oops. Which then rolled into Social Democrats in Germany. And here we have a coalition of US-backed forces, which generally means mercenaries, and the Syrian Democratic Forces. And they attacked the main building of the Syrian Commercial Bank branch of the government, located in the gathering of official departments in the southern section of the Gowarian district at the entrance of Al-Zohor neighbourhood in Hasaka City. And the building was controlled by QASD, is located near the industrial prison, the industrial secondary school, and the industrial institute, according to the report. Now, the southern section of that district is where the industrial prison is located. There's a reason why I said that. Because that's the exact same jail that the alleged ISIS, ISIL, IS, and Daesh all broke out earlier this month. I'm sure you can all connect the dots. Mr. Trump this week accused Facebook Inc., Twitter Inc., and Alphabet Inc. Go Ogle of being controlled by the radical left, and said that his administration is working to remedy what he called an illegal situation. And in a tweet, he also mentions the Facebook-owned Instagram. And the US president commented on a clip by conservative blogger Michelle Malkin, lambasting the so-called deplatforming of conservative voices by technology companies. Trump didn't elaborate on potential measures targeting the tech giants. Yet again, you all know where that links back to. Virginia again. Trump again decided to play The Apprentice, and you're fired this week. The US State Department's Inspector General Steve Linick has become the latest senior official to be fired by President Trump. I have to say this particular firing disturbed me no end. You'll understand why in a minute. Now, Mr. Trump said Mr. Linick no longer had his full confidence and that he would be removed in 30 days. Now, what had Mr. Linick done? He had begun investigating Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Deep State, remember, for suspected abuse of office, the reports say. And not long after Mr. Linick's dismissal was announced, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee said Mr. Linick had opened an investigation into the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who is Deep State, and said this firing is the outrageous act of a president trying to protect one of his most loyal supporters, the Secretary of State, from accountability, according to Elliot Engel, in a statement, and he said, "I have learned that the Office of the Inspector General had opened an investigation into Secretary Pompeo, and Mr. Lennox firing amid such a probe strongly suggests that this is an unlawful act of retaliation." I hope there's valid reason for that, because that doesn't look good. Where are we next? The UK. This is kind of indicative of what goes on, in the higher circles and agencies, how they're completely above law in any form. You've all seen it with the FBI, the CIA, NSA, and the collusion and Ukraine stuff. No one gets jail. Even to date, nobody's been jailed. They've all committed serious crimes, and yet none of them have been jailed. Anyway, this is a latest example of that type of poor behaviour going unpunished because of some fake rules that seems to apply to certain groups in this country and elsewhere. Anne Elizabeth Goodwin Secoulis is a CIA officer, and she was named by Sky News in the UK as the driver involved in a crash in the UK which killed a 19-year-old motorcyclist. Now, the US State Department claimed that she had, quote, diplomatic immunity, unquote. But the UK FCO did not accept this. And whilst the investigation was going on, she fled to America on a United States Air Force plane, and the US government denied any extradition request without legal justification. So, woman runs somebody over and kills them and gets away with it because they work for the CIA. Now, Interpol have issued a red notice for her in May this month. And on April the 24th, Craig Murray wrote, "Beyond any doubt, it would have been Dominic Raab's personal decision to grant a fake diplomatic immunity to Anne Secoulis and permit her to leave the country." So there was collusion with the British intelligence. So Anne Secoulis was reportedly driving on the right-hand side of the road, which is the wrong side for the UK, remember, when the SUV collided head-on with the motorbike of a 19-year-old named Harry Dunn. And mystery still surrounds the exact circumstances of how the Secoulis family were able to flee days after the crash, but the US government claimed they notified the Foreign Office that they were leaving, and she claimed diplomatic immunity, which the UK FCO denied, and then fled the country aboard an American Air Force aircraft. And then the US government denied the extradition. Now, the statement from the US State Department said that the driver was the spouse of an accredited diplomat to the United Kingdom, although Craig Murray noted that since there is no Jordan Secoulis on the official diplomatic list, that doesn't apply. Now, neither Secoulis nor his wife had any right to claim diplomatic immunity under the Vienna Convention of Diplomatic Relations, and Interpol has issued a red notice for her arrest, which comes 9 months after the death of the young lad. It's unreal. A scientist who has been creating a database in Florida for COVID-19 wasn't just removed from her position on May the 5th, she was fired on the Monday by the Department of Health for, listen closely, quote, refusing to manipulate the data, unquote. Rebecca Jones said in an email to Florida Today that she single-handedly created 2 applications in 2 languages, 4 dashboards, 6 unique maps with layers of data functionality for 32 variables covering 500,000 lines of data. And her objective was to create a way for Floridians and researchers to see what the COVID-19 situation was in real time. And then she was dismissed because she wouldn't manipulate the data. And she said, I've worked on it alone 16 hours a day for 2 months, most of which I was never paid for. And now this has happened and I'll probably never get paid for. And confirming that she had been reassigned on May the 5th, but then fired from her job as Geographic Information Systems Manager for the Florida Department of Health. It beggars belief. So essentially she was fired because she was ordered to censor some of the data, but refused to manually change data to drum up support for the plan. A lot of people have lost jobs during this lockdown for speaking out, doing the right thing, and obviously, which we'll cover later, the substantial downturn in the economy. So a federal judge on Monday has allowed a federal lawsuit accusing Donald Trump, his 3 eldest children, and his company of collaborating with a fraudulent marketing scheme to prey on investors to proceed, which there was denying the Trump's request for a stay. Now, the lawsuit was originally filed in October of 2018 and amended a few months later, alleges that in exchange for secret payments, Trump and 3 of his adult children used his former reality TV show, The Celebrity Apprentice, and other promotional events as vehicles to boost ANC Opportunity, which is a telecommunications marketing company linked to a non-profit that used Trump's brand to appeal to teens. Now, the lawsuit also accused the Trumps of having profited off the poor and vulnerable as people looking to enrich themselves by systematically defrauding economically marginalized people looking to invest in their educations, start their own small businesses, and pursue the American dream, which you have to be asleep to see it. Another illusion. And 4 anonymous plaintiffs have brought the lawsuit, including what court papers describe as a hospice caregiver, a self-employed man who was once homeless, and also a food delivery driver. And they are all alleged that Trump deliberately misled consumers about the likely success of their investments, the suit claims, and engaged in a pattern of racketeering activity. Now, the lawsuit, is being funded by the non-profit group called Tesseract Research Centre, which does have ties to Democratic candidates. So you could, depending on who you favour, you could take that with a pinch of salt. But we'll see what happens with this. Is it real? Who knows? You know, from the reports I've got, there's been a lot of dodgy dealings involving the Trumps over many years. You know, the man said himself he's been bankrupt 6 times and deliberately bankrupt so he can start again. You know, he said he actually used the system. So, is it possible he was involved in this? Quite possibly. We'll see. So I looked into Tesseract Research Centre, and there's not that much details, but the group was run by Maurice Pearl, who also currently serves as a chairperson for the, quote, Patriotic Millionaires, a group of hundreds of high net worth Americans, they say, who are committed to making all Americans, including themselves, better off by building a more prosperous, stable and inclusive nation. Millionaires being inclusive, well, I never. You know, for every millionaire, there's tens of thousands who don't have anything. So how can that possibly be more inclusive? Yes, again, it's more marketing, snake oil ploys, and more illusion. Now, Mr. Pearl was born in, but I'm not certain whether he was born to, although his previous role suggests that that is more likely. He was former managing director at BlackRock. See how it all connects, which is the Black Sun. The plot thickens, as they say. Pier 1 company has announced on Tuesday that it's asking the bankruptcy court to release its retail operations as soon as reasonably possible, and it blames temporary store closures caused by the virus and failing to find a buyer for the drastic decision. And it says it plans to sell all of its remaining inventory, the website, and all the intellectual property. But they did say orders placed on its website will continue to be fulfilled. I would go and collect them very, very quickly. I've heard that before, and it always ends badly for the consumer. Now, Pier 1 has cut its store count in half since last year, and it announced in February that it was closing around 450 stores, including all of its locations in Canada. Now, the company currently owns more than 500 stores, which was down from over 1,000 last year. Unfortunately, Pier 1, and we did warn of this in the shows, is not alone in filing for complete bankruptcy. Those shops are not going to be replaced. You know, Pier 1, 1,000 stores. But also is JCPenney, Neiman Marcus, J.Crew have all filed in recent weeks, and all blaming the virus and shifting consumer behaviour. Interesting, the firings carry on in government circles and 3- and 4-letter clown circles. And the head of NASA's Human Spaceflight Office has resigned just 1 week before the agency is expected to launch astronauts from American soil for the first time in nearly a decade. Did you hear about that? Me either. Anyway, according to this, they are. And it's coming up next week. Douglas Lavero has served as the Associate Administrator for Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate for just the past 7 months, and he took over in October after his predecessor, William Gerstenmaier, Zeke Heil, was demoted and eventually left the agency. On May 27th, NASA plans to send 2 astronauts to the International Space Station aboard SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule. They love their names. And this is the first time since the retirement of the Space Shuttle program in 2011 that astronauts will launch from US soil. I hope that's a valid trip, because other trips that were for nefarious purposes have ended badly in recent years for various space-related agencies. Hello Israel, hello China, hello India, hello Russia, hello Elon Musk. That better be a valid reason, because that's going to go boom. Central Bank of Venezuela has now launched a legal claim to try and force the Bank of England to release 930 million euros, which is about $1 billion, worth of gold that it's holding on behalf of Venezuela. Good luck with that. I think there's as much gold in there as there is in Fort Knox, which is 0. Venezuela has been suffering under US sanctions, and also Langley Clowns says it wants to use the gold's value to tackle coronavirus, and the proceedings follow a request made weeks ago asking for the value to be transferred to the United Nations. Christ, they're not very bright, are they? Oh dear, from one bank robber to another. Legal documents say the bank wants the transfer made as a matter of urgency to buy food supplies and also medicine. The country so far has reported 618 coronavirus cases and just 10 deaths. Now, the Venezuela economy has collapsed under the leadership of President Nicolas Maduro. Well, it's actually got nothing to do with Maduro, and actually everything to do with clowns interfering in that country. Yes, you, Obama, with your FARC guerrillas and your free oil with the Bushes, Netanyahu and Khamenei of Iran. And Mr. Maduro, obviously, his leadership is not recognised by dozens of nations, including the UK and the US. Yes, because he wouldn't play their game. It's a bit like Madagascar. You know, if you don't agree with what the European or American political or agency-related narrative, they just smash your country. And this is what's been going on. And unfortunately, millions of people have fled the country in recent years, and shortages of essentials have become rather widespread. People with long memories, more than a year, will remember that the People's Club sent food and supplies to a small Venezuelan village last year. We tried our bit.